traffic engineers
Yeah,
to work
okay.
something out to go over the speed limit.
Right, I think that that's a great question, and I think North First Street is a perfect example. I mean, North First Street, you know, sort of north of the airport, between the airport and Tasman, the speed of the street could probably be higher, which would allow the trains to go higher, and that's something that we should explore. You know, safety is a concern, and we would have to sort of demonstrate that it could be worked. But there's a lot of places in the system where it's the speed of the street that's limiting the speed of the trains.
Yeah, and I mean, cars, it just doesn't seem like on most of these streets where you're running in the median, I don't see why the trains can't be allowed 5 or 10 miles an hour more than vehicle lanes.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But is there any way legally to do
Well,
this?
I mean, and so you're not, you know, we don't really talk about it in this study, but we actually are involved in a research project. It's a national level research project. VTA is we're one of the case study properties where we're supposed to be looking at that exact question right there. And it's run by TCRP, the sort of national research organization. And we're looking at North First, you know, as an area to sort of push our upper limits of our speed. It requires waivers from regulatory agencies, but we're going to be.
Yes. The word pocket, yes, I don't know what that means.
Small.
It's a little track which allows, basically, at that station, there's two tracks on the, and those are the main line. If you built a little siding track, you allow a train to get off, to allow trains to get off of the main line. And the Ohlone station could accommodate that. It actually was designed for a future pocket track.
I have been to Ohlone station. One of the things that kind of, I think that could have been improved, I mean, when the way it was built, is to have a central platform. Right now, it's sort of like if you want to transfer from the other train on the northbound direction, then you have to cross the tracks, so that basically the trains cannot be sitting, you cannot do cross-platform transfer.
Right.
So, you know, how could that ever be addressed? Or
Yeah, this design assumes that you're going to have to be, those people will be able to make transfers easily across platform. Yeah.
San Fernando is the transit hub for
Yeah.
San Jose State with the library dash.
Yeah.
And then you're skirting just north of campus, you're not bisecting it.
Right, right. Well, there's a couple things there. I mean, one is there's been a historic discouragement of looking at light rail on San Fernando, not just for this project, but for others, because of utilities, that it's the primary utility corridor for downtown, and there's T1 lines and things like that underneath the street that would be phenomenally expensive to relocate. And the other one would happen to be just in terms of the track architecture and the way things are built today. San Carlos would be easier, and it wouldn't be so easy to actually turn onto San Fernando. And that probably was that's the more prevalent reason for us, frankly, than the thing about the utility.
Would you have to construct any additional track or any additional sidings to accommodate this express service on the Tasman West line?
Just double track.
Just.
You'd have to double track the single track segment.
Oh, I see. Where over near the Wisman station.
Right.
You'd need to double track that, but that's it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
you expand it to double track between Wisman and downtown Mountain View. How would that play with the plans for California High-Speed Rail, which will require 4 tracks and
Yeah.
will take up all of that
Right.
right of way? How would that be done?
You know, I mean, I do not know the answer to that, and neither does High Speed Rail, from what I can tell. And you know, we've asked them that question, and they're not giving us the runaround. They haven't looked at that. Obviously, that's going to be an area that's going to be a focus of that for design from their perspective and ours. But we could see it as a potential opportunity to really make this correction in the system if we can find a design solution that works for both high-speed rail and light rail.
Question about North First Street. I looked at the original document of this, and it proposed skip-stop service on North First Street. Is that still being looked at? Or
No.
is that
We dropped that. And you know, well, I mean, if you saw in the original document, there's like 20, more than 20 different variations and different things that we we've explored. The study's almost a year old. Like skip stop is a good example. We were going with the idea of like, we've got to make it faster on North First Street, and one way to do that is to have an A train and a B train, and they would just make alternate stops. The result, when we analyzed it, was we were losing ridership. And the reason why is because North First Street was where everyone wanted to go. And so you were kind of alienating the riders by making them inconveniencing them, making it on one train or another.
Making them transfer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if everyone was going bypassing First Street, that would have been a great idea. But that's not the case. Everyone was actually going to those stations.
The crossovers at the maintenance yard, I guess there's a speed limit of 15 miles per hour over the crossovers, and I know it's probably not a big difference in like overall time savings, but the train had to slow down and then speed up over the crossovers. Was that what the?
There's a number of slow areas on the system that we're also going to look at. As we're doing these larger looks, those little pieces weren't jumping up here yet, but we're going to look at those as well.
Express trains, are you going to have sidings somewhere? And how would you do that going through it's the part that's along 87, right?
You don't have to add new sidings. You just have to have a pocket track at Ohlone, and you really don't even have to do the pocket track at Ohlone. You can do it with all existing infrastructure. You need to do signal improvements, so you need to improve the signal system to allow for that.
VTA's funding priorities on Measure A are leaning towards BART. How's the agency proposed to pay for many of these extensions? I understand that the extensions to both East Bridge and Persona are part of it, but the extension to San Jose State as proposed, how would that be funded?
I don't have an answer for that. I mean, basically, there's funding is available. There's always regional funding, state funding, federal funding. VTA has to be competitive. We have to compete against other properties for that funding. We're not going to be able to compete unless we have good planning work. And that's what we're trying to do here, is establish some good planning work that really gets us in that ballgame. I mean, we can't really even compete unless we have a plan to go after. So we're certainly not going to limit what we're doing from the planning side because we may not get the funding. What we have to do is really be prepared to go out there and get the funding. And you have to do efforts like this. So that's a great question. I'll just repeat it for the benefit. All of our ridership numbers here, you can notice, are 2035. Did we look at some interim year that doesn't assume this massive growth, like 2015 or something? And the answer is not yet. That's something else we need to do to really best understand how these work. But that's something sort of on our to-do list for next time. So all we have now is the 2035. I'm going to repeat the question was, what kind of headways were we considering with this kind of arrangement? Was it all day or whatever? And the answer is we could do it anyway. And that's one of the ideas, is to do things in a flexible manner. But in the future, we'd be looking at 10-minute headways for this. So, every 5 minutes, a train would be coming through Ohlone Chenoweth. And so that's kind of the design for the peak part of the system. In the off-peak times, we may revert back to 15 minutes, depending on the demand. But, it's designed for a 10-minute frequency.